Okay. Okay, then 1, 2, and 3. Hey guys, so this is apparently our sixth try to get this podcast started. Yeah, we tried 5 times before, it all failed. But I think this time it's good. So, welcome to the Ghost Countries podcast. Today, our episode is going to be about Epirus.
You're
And
taking all my lines, but yeah.
yeah, sorry. So I'm Manuel as always, and the guy that you just heard was Ghost. Hello, Ghost.
Hey. Yeah, so yeah, no, like Manuel said, yeah, we're doing another podcast here on Ghost Countries, and we will be looking into one of the first countries we've talked about so far on the channel, from the ancient world, Epirus. And yeah, I'll just hand it back to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I like ancient history a lot, so doing this episode was fun, at least for me. Even though,
I have
yeah,
fun
it
too,
was,
yeah.
yeah. Um, Unfortunately, that one was not performing as well as many others,
Hmm.
but I personally liked it a lot. Um, for the people who still don't know, Epirus was a country which nowadays would be laying like between Greece, Western Greece, and Albania, and was actually already at that time, yeah, basically between the cultures.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's a very interesting story. Like many people, they heard about Epirus, they yeah they can tell more or less where it is, but I think most people wouldn't have some like connections to what Epirus actually exactly was.
Oh,
Or
and
for example, yeah, sorry, I didn't want to cut you
no, no,
off.
no. I mean, that's usually my line as well. But I was going to say, no, I can vouch for that personally because I did know of Epirus, obviously, as you know, we're both kind of historians of sorts. I like history, and I that includes that of the ancient world and Greece. And I did know of Epirus and certain aspects of it, but I will admit, a lot of my knowledge was pretty limited, and I think probably my biggest exposure was Rome 2 Total War. It was one of the Hellenic factions you could play as, or Greek state factions. Yeah, so it was honestly kind of limited. I mean, I knew Epirus was in, what's kind of like northwestern Greece today, near Corfu. And I did know some stuff like about the Molossians and the war dogs, and I guess I did know of Pyrrhus, but I didn't really put two and two together that he was from Epirus, or at least if I did, I didn't really think of it that much. So I will admit it was very much an illuminating episode for me, and a really fascinating one because Epirus, it played you know, for its size, I think a pretty big role in the Hellenic world's ancient history. And it went beyond that with what you saw happening over in Italy and elsewhere. You kind of mentioned like the Balkans. It's I think it's fascinating. It definitely is a forgotten Hellenic power, in my opinion. It fits perfectly with that definition.
Yeah, I totally go with that. And something that I actually forgot, what you just mentioned, wasn't there the unit Molossian War Dogs?
Yeah, yeah, that was a mercenary you could get in the game.
Yeah, I totally forgot that. I was just remembering that right now when you said it.
I don't remember if they were that good, but I remember using them. But strangely
Yeah,
enough, I was Egypt in that campaign, so that's a different story.
no, like I don't, but I remember the name as well. But during the whole production of the episode, I didn't know it. I totally forgot that one. Um, yeah.
Well, just
As,
actually,
so as,
oh, sorry, I was just going to say on that note quickly, talking about animals, I think it's really interesting because when you think of like war elephants, I think of Hannibal. And I mean, I know war elephants were used elsewhere, obviously, but there's quite a lot from like India and other parts of the ancient world. But I just find it really interesting that Pyrrhus was a big proponent of war elephants, and I don't know, it's just a really interesting kind of side note to his story that I did not know much of.
yeah, I mean, I think the reason why this one of Hannibal is, I mean, there were, yeah, several. states or leaders, let's say, who used war elephants, especially in let's say in areas where elephants are actually living. But Hannibal, I mean, first of all, it's like a pop cultural thing. That's why it's so famous.
Hmm.
And secondly, I thought maybe it was that famous as well because, I mean, because basically he marched all over parts of Europe where elephants have never been seen
Sure.
to get there. Um, yeah, so I think that's why it's that popular. But yeah, I like the fact as well that Pyrrhus was actually, yeah, he loved war elephants. And
Yeah.
actually, there we got the first person, actually, Pyrrhus. I think a lot of people know Pyrrhus, and a lot of people know Epirus, but would a lot of people do the connection between Epirus and Pyrrhus?
No, that was what I was going to say. I did not have that connection, especially when you consider how famous his name is in relation to another military term that we'll get to in a moment. But yeah, no, it's like I said, I think a lot of people, myself included, have or had, um, like you said, bits and pieces of the story of Epirus, but we didn't have them all put together. And I think that, again, is because it's definitely overshadowed. When you think of the Hellenic world, I mean, Sparta, Athens, Macedonia. I mean, there's others to be sure, but this one is definitely kind of like overshadowed by others.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think a big reason for that is not only um, that Sparta and Athens and stuff were that big, but as well that Epirus was a little different to the rest. I mean,
True.
admittedly, Macedonia was too. I mean, before Philip II, Macedonia was actually like impoverished.
Mm,
Yeah, so and their culture was a little different to that one south to Macedonia.
mhm.
But
The
yeah,
Peloponnese.
yeah, exactly. Like, and I think like most of the Greek states were city states, and Epirus and Macedonia were not, which already makes it a lot more special in comparison to the rest.
Well, and then also, kind of in that same vein, like we touched upon in the episode, even though they were nominally, Hellenic or Greek, uh, the other, true Greeks of that time did not consider them to be actual Greeks. They were kind of like pseudo or wannabe Greeks. And there definitely was that divide because, as we mentioned, Epirus was denied participation in a number of events and, uh, you know, roles that, if it was considered a legitimate Greek power, it should have been probably at least participatory in some capacity. But they were not viewed as such. They were considered outsiders.
Yeah, which that's actually really funny that they were not admitted to the Olympic Games,
Hmm.
but
Hey, are those
they, I
going to
mean,
happen this year still?
what?
Are those still going to happen this year?
Oh, I heard they do,
Yeah, no,
but
they are. Just
without
no,
spectators.
yeah, no spectators. It's I think the state of emergency starts, or
Yeah.
not state of
So
emergency.
it's
Yeah.
actually a lot more similar to the original Olympic Games without. I mean, you still actually right now. No, it's actually the opposite because right now you got the spectators on the TV, but at that time you didn't have. You just had those live, and right now you don't have those live. It's just on TV.
It's an interesting event. But yeah, sorry, I go on with what you were saying.
So, like, what I was trying to say is, uh, yeah, they were not admitted to the Olympic Games, but when it was about legends and stuff, yeah, of course, then you can mention Epirus, but no, don't let them come in. But you can, of course, talk about them and act like, yeah, they're actually part of Greece.
Yeah.
At least that's what it looked like to me. It was like, yeah, no, you're not part of us, but if it fits our purposes, yeah, you're part.
Well, no, exactly, because it's really kind of weird that dichotomy there, where it's as you said, they're considered their own separate entity on the fringe of the Hellenic world, but they fit into a lot of lore and legends of the ancient Greek world. And let's not forget the oracle at Dodona. That's a major. I think it was like what, only second to the one at Delphi, and that was that's pretty significant. That's a pretty significant part of the ancient Hellenic world, and excuse me if I had any mispronunciations there, but the point being is that was a major oracle and pilgrimage site, and it's just kind of weird that it would be in a ostensibly non-Greek part of the Hellenic world.
Yeah, and I mean, like to me, it's actually incredible the Oracle of Delphi, how famous that actually is.
Hmm.
But the second ranking, almost on par with the first one, Dodona, is. I mean, before doing research here, I didn't know it,
No, same
and
here.
and if you asked me a third oracle in Greece, I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
I can't tell you one.
I can tell you this much. I think it is a faction like Perk for Epirus in Rome Total War or Rome 2 Total War. I don't remember what it does, but it adds some type of buff. So I think I have heard of it before, but again, only in passing. I mean, compared to Delphi, it's like, yeah, just very, very scant.
Yeah. So actually, yeah, I liked it how Epirus was basically always moving between the two worlds,
Hmm.
or actually wanted to kind of belong to Greece, but was kind of different too. And I definitely do think that this inner rivalry what they had was stifling their process as well.
Yeah.
Like with the three factions in there. Uh, we did in the episode that Protein.
Oh, so yeah, exactly. That's proteins.
Yeah, test protons. Yeah. No,
But
so yeah. What did you want to say?
oh no, sorry. I was just saying to your point there, I completely agree. The major factor that undermined Epirus, and maybe you could make the argument this is because they were not in essence like truly. I don't know. I don't think it's fair to say they were not Greek, but they were definitely a different variant of it. But because there's regional dynamics and stuff. But what I was trying to say is the three factions, the three tribes within Epirus, the internal divisions. Obviously, things of this nature existed to some degree in other Greek city-states and factions at the time, but it definitely was a unique aspect to Epirus itself. And I think that is what definitely, uh, resulted in its failure in the end. The only thing that really seemed to hold it together was when there was a strong central authority, such as Pyrrhus or other, leaders at various times. I mean, when that was gone, when there was internal disarray, when there was no leadership, it just was non-functioning and fell upon itself.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely true. So yeah, I can just say actually what I said before. It's like super interesting that it was so forgotten. Because when I was younger, especially, I was very interested in Greece, actually, like in ancient Greece history. And all the things that we mentioned before, I heard of them a lot of times, but Epirus kind of
Yeah.
left there. And that actually Epirus was even involved in southern Italy on many occasions. I mean, I think already this is a factor which many people who may not be from Europe wouldn't know, because this area, let's say south south of Rome, the part of Italy was actually for a long period called Magna Graecia or Graecia.
Hmm.
I know that there are discussions about Latin about how it was pronounced. Magna Graecia, let's say. That I mean, so it was called. I mean, what would that be in English? Bigger
Bigger or
Greece or something
greater
like that.
Greece, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Greater Greece. Yeah. So this was actually like very Hellenic place at that time,
Oh, yeah.
uh, and that makes it actually very interesting because many people wouldn't know that. Um,
Well, think about like the Greek influence in the Mediterranean world. I mean, it was quite expansive. I mean, Syracuse over in Sicily. You had Greek colonies in North Africa, in southern France, Iberia. I mean, all over the Mediterranean world at
yeah,
various points in times.
I mean the city of Marseille
Yeah.
nowadays was actually a Greek colony,
Yep. I know exactly.
and that's very interesting. I mean, you can see that somehow in the Roman culture that developed, that it was very heavily influenced by the Greek one,
Hmm.
and then just further developed. Um, yeah, but especially in southern Italy, there was a lot, and still nowadays, actually, you can see some remains of that.
Hmm.
Um, but of course, there you could argue as well. Oh, that was actually built in the Roman times.
True.
Okay, but even the Greek influence, you can actually still see it at some points. Um, and so, yeah, Epirus was with Alexander the Molossan and uh, with Pyrrhus itself involved in southern Italy.
Yeah.
And actually, to be honest, when we were doing the research, there was a little bit of confusion at the beginning because I don't know what exactly we got wrong, but there was definitely something we got wrong at the beginning because that was so confusing with the factions. Like I think in the video we didn't go too much into detail. We said what happened, but
Wasn't it about who they were fighting in southern
yeah,
Italy, if I'm correct?
I think it was something like that. Like
Because they actually fought the Epirotes. They fought the various Italic tribes in the area. They weren't actually fighting the Romans per se at that point, if I'm right, right?
yeah, yeah. The Romans were somehow involved too, but I
Yeah,
don't
yeah, no, they
remember.
were, but like
Yeah,
not in the same capacity as I think we had it originally. I think, if I'm
yeah.
remembering that.
But that was with Alexander the Molossan because with Pyrrhus, that was
True.
pretty sure Rome. Yeah,
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was the thing, if I'm remembering that correctly. But now, okay, so we've mentioned uh Epirus, we've mentioned Rome, we've mentioned southern Italy. Well, we kind of mentioned Rome. I think we're dancing around one big term that is tied in with, a central figure we've talked about here, Pyrrhus, which is his infamous, very costly victories, the Pyrrhic or Pyrrhic. I feel like I'm getting my pronunciations off here, but basically a victory that is
I always knew it at Pyrrhic victories,
Pyrrhic
but
victory, excuse me. I do think I said that wrong as well then. But anyway, the Pyrrhic victory, which is a victory that it is a victory, but is so costly, it's like, is it worth it? And I have to say it's fascinating to me that I know that term. That term is still, well, for people who are familiar with history, especially military history, that's, it's pretty common. But I never really dove into the history behind it because I knew it was associated with a general and I knew, the background behind it to a degree, but I did not know it was part of Epirus's saga as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's exactly one of the things why I think the name Pyrrhus is actually known.
Hmm,
Because everybody or a lot of people, at least in German, it's a very famous term as well.
sure.
And so it is in English. So I think that's why a lot of people heard about Paris before, but maybe don't know exactly who that was.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's I thought that was a fascinating aspect and also Pyrrhus's ultimate death. I mean, I know, it's debatable exactly what happened, and as with so many incidents in history, you have multiple different versions of the story. I mean, for instance, this is going way off topic, but with General Charles Gordon in the Battle of Khartoum, he died. The Mahdist army took the city, and the remaining garrison was wiped out, and everything happened. That is fact. And as I said, Charles Gordon died. But how he died, there's multiple different tales. Now, some maybe are more authentic than the others, but it's you can never be 100% definitive because you don't have evidence that can be like, yes, this is exactly what happened. But still, the ultimate end of Pyrrhus's tale, roof shingle hitting him, falling off his horse, breaking his spine, and then either he died from that or being, beheaded by a passing soldier, enemy soldier. It's definitely a interesting end to his story.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I didn't know he made this end. I mean, we had this famous story with the roof tile.
Yeah.
Uh, um, but with this, I'm always a little like cautious because I know how these stories basically come around, and very often it's like, yeah, like some talk or whatever, and I don't
Mhm.
know how safe it is to say that he died in that way.
Oh no,
Um,
exactly. Again, that's why I mentioned like Charles Gordon. You've got multiple different tales. He went down fighting in a hail of like gunfire and was ultimately, killed in action, speared and stuff like that in the governor's palace. Or he tried to escape and seek protection at a consulate and got discovered and killed in the streets of Khartoum. Or he, the more famous rendition is that he, you know, stood at the top of the stairs and the modest rebels came in and there was like this stare down at each other where no one moved, and eventually when they confronted him he just kind of dismissed them and went to walk off and got stabbed in that. So there's, and they all fit different narratives of the time. Obviously one side wants to portray him as cowardly and the other side wants to show him as this Victorian British stoic general. So the same goes to Pyrrhus. I'm sure there were competing narratives at the time and even in the decades and centuries afterwards about, one wants to destroy him, make him into, not a good person. They want to destroy his tale, and there's probably others who wanted to elevate it. So I'm sure there is a truth somewhere in there, but it's like, how do you figure out who or what?
Actually, for doing research with one of our future episodes, I don't know if I can mention that here.
Yeah, you can give a little bit of a taste if you want.
Yeah, it's okay. It's gonna be about Wallachia.
Hmm.
There was actually a very similar story with the Hungarian king who fled a battle.
Mm.
And there were these kind of stories that, he gave his clothings and symbols of power to one of his guards.
Hmm.
And that guard was basically killed instead of him because he was trying to escape. But these kind of stories could be very easily like written by people who didn't like him and just wanted to act like he's a coward or something. So I'm not sure how true that actually was, but there are some stories like that.
Oh,
or
no,
for
exactly.
example as well, that one of his soldiers fought like a lot of enemies to let the king escape and stuff. There's some stories like that.
Oh, no,
But
exactly. It's all narrative spinning, and I mean, there is a truth there somewhere, but when the sources go farther back in time, it's hard to find definitive evidence pointing one way or another, and then you kind of have to make it like a forensic investigation, I guess, where it's like, what fits the most with the character of that person? Like, what occurred at other junctures in their life and try to see what was the most, likely outcome. But again, if you have very few older sources, it's all the more harder to figure out what actually happened.
yeah, exactly. So what I was actually wanted to mention before is I think that idiom, it's an idiom, right? Like Pyrrhic victory. There's actually one which is very similar, actually, not in the meaning itself, but I think like from the story, it's a similar one, and that is Midas touch.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I think a lot of people heard about Midas touch, but what it actually was, I think a lot of people won't remember it, because there was that legend of a from where was he from? Phrygia or something like that.
Hmm.
I think it was a Phrygian king, um, who was said to be the things that he touched were turning to gold. And I think that is a very similar to this Pyrrhic victory, where a lot of people heard from that, but who that exactly was, I think a lot of people didn't know.
Hey, maybe that's a future episode.
But Midas,
Yeah.
well, he could, but I'm not sure if he was a real. I mean,
No, I
I don't
know.
think there was a human who really turned things into gold when
Wait a
he touched him.
second. No, but it would be interesting to have some fictional ghost countries because there are some like countries that, though they did not exist, or figures from those countries, they exerted such great influence over the people of their time because of the myths, the legends, the stories behind them. I'm
Atlantis.
Well, I mean, that's arguably one. There's also I mean, there's a lot of things out there like the lost continent of Mu, the White City in Central America, El Dorado.
Yeah, El Dorado, which is basically featured in one of our future episodes too.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things out there, and I'm also thinking of, I'm blanking on his name, but the Christian king that various legends at times said was either in, like hidden in parts of Africa, and you've had similar things like
Yeah,
that.
they said that was that Ethiopian. I think Johannes, like John something.
Yeah, King John or King. I don't know why I was going to say Nestor, but that sounds wrong. But
I
there's
think I think his German name was Priesterkönig Johannes. Could it be like Priester John or something like that?
Prester
Like,
John. There you go. There you go.
yeah,
There we go. That's why that Nestor came in, even though it wasn't Nestor. But so there's yeah, there's some really interesting truly ghost countries because they didn't have well, to our knowledge they didn't have a life behind them. They truly are, fictional or mythological, but still they exerted influence in their times to some degree.
yeah. I mean, just think about nowadays how many fictional things
Yeah.
influence our culture. I
Yeah, no,
mean,
exactly. So that would be an interesting thing to look into. Maybe not immediately, but down the line, future of the channel. Maybe that would be something we do, kind of a mythological month or
yeah.
something.
You can tell us what you think about that. Um, I do think too that it would be interesting to have some of these periods as well. Uh, yeah, I mean, not as the is not gonna become the main topic of our channel,
No.
but sometimes periodically, yeah, I do think that that could be very interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean just like we previously did that America month, so to
Or
speak.
Middle Earth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but to be fair, yeah, I mean, you could even think of like some of the fictional, I don't know what you want to call them, kingdoms or countries from like, the Elder Scrolls and yeah, Tolkien. There's a lot of interesting things you could dive into, but who knows? Maybe that happens at some point in the future. Maybe it's just a special or something like that. But yeah, let us know
Yeah,
what you think. But we are going to, obviously, the bread and butter of the channel is going to remain, obviously, ghost countries, and actual historical events. But
yeah,
so taking a step back into reality, Epirus. Epirus ultimately was, swallowed up, as was the rest of Greece, by the Roman conquest. But it did eventually return, and I know we will be going into that in a future video as well. But I think we should touch upon the story a little bit here because it is interesting that Epirus continued to remain an actual geopolitical entity for quite a while, and now it is gone in the literal sense of the word. It's, split between Albania and Greece. But I think it's fascinating that this entity continued for, you know, decades and centuries to exist, and then it ultimately was just snubbed out completely. Pretty close to the modern era, actually. I mean, there was that little brief uprising in the early 20th century, which kind of, is a name only. Well, not really just a name only, but still, I don't know. It's fascinating to me that such a major player in the ancient world, continued to have a long history and then ultimately was just wiped off the map.
yeah, yeah. I do think that's interesting too because I mean I think the reason was basically the position,
Yeah.
which was yeah, it's difficult. But I do agree. Actually, the second one about Epirus is going to be very interesting too because I think the reason why it's actually so interesting is because it's in a very interesting location in
Hmm.
general.
And time
Um,
period. I mean, it was definitely a different
yeah,
time.
yeah. So yeah, I think both of the episodes that we're gonna have about actually basically all three, I
Yeah.
think are gonna be pretty interesting.
Yeah, Epirus, despite
Um,
being such a forgotten entity, is getting a lot of coverage on the channel in due time. It's not all going to be at once, but and
yeah,
what again is interesting in the second chapter of Epirus, that entity actually exerted a pretty powerful influence over the Greek world, Asia Minor, the Balkans, southern
yeah,
Italy. Again, it was not a non-existent, just, little thing off on the sidelines. No, it was a major player.
yeah. And that's exactly the interesting point that I got because the second I mean so the despotate the second one was called the despotate
Gave away the name? No,
um of
it's fine.
Epirus, huh?
No, no, I was just joking. I was saying it's fine. Go on.
Yeah, so the despotate of Epirus was basically like the first story of Epirus. and again, like they had their times when they were moving up, and then there was a stark fall down, and
Mm.
so it was similar to Pyrrhus' story actually. Um,
Yeah, it's like a remix.
yeah, and I mean, you again moved between the factions here, were never really like somebody who was just, oh yeah, that's just that stuff over there, but was a yeah major power for a long period of time, or at least was exerting influence over others too.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's very fascinating. And so you guys, if you like the first episode of Epirus, you're gonna definitely like the second one as well. But I think even people maybe who were not interested in the first one could be interested in the second one.
Oh yeah, because in many
Um,
ways it's a similar story, but it is different. And I think that
yeah,
goes
it's
to the
it's
whole.
similar. It's similar, but a different theme. It seems.
Yeah, no, and
Yeah,
that kind of goes to the whole thing, history repeats itself, or history doesn't repeat itself, but it echoes. And
yeah,
it's kind of the same thing here. It's not exactly the same, but in some ways it is very similar. It's an echo of what happened before. And but it is a different time period. There's different players, and I think it was a fascinating story. Honestly, it was one that, again, I don't think I had a lot of prior knowledge. I had some because I did hear of these players. I did hear of the countries, but I did not dive into detail on it. And honestly, it was a truly fascinating story for me, not to, you know, kind of just be like the guy trying to sell it to you, potential viewers. But seriously, I found it fascinating. It was a very interesting story.
yeah, yeah. Me too. Um,
And then, of
yeah,
course, there is that third later story, but that's a future video.
that's definitely gonna take some time until this one is out, but it will come.
Yeah, eventually it will be there. Then you'll have the complete story of Epirus
The
from the
Epirus
ancient
saga.
world to the, well, still ancient, but not as ancient world, and then 20th century.
Yeah, but like I mean, we got that with some of our videos who deserve like attention. Then we put like a second part or maybe a
Oh,
third,
exactly.
or at least in that area. Because it's actually interesting. The more research you do, the more ghost countries you actually find. It's like, wait, what? Ooh,
Oh,
what was that country
100%.
here?
100%.
That's. I mean, like for example, the Bulgarian Empire.
Mm,
I never had an idea it was this vast and this powerful
no,
as
same
it
here.
actually was.
Same here.
Um, and that's really fascinating. I mean, we didn't have plans for the Bulgarian Empire, but I think why not one day?
Oh,
Um,
definitely. I mean, our list keeps growing, both based on our own individual research and group research, and then, of course, what viewers recommend. I mean, it's kind of like an endlessly growing list at this point. Um,
yeah,
and that's great because we're not going to run out of content for a pretty long time, if ever, I think.
yeah.
Um,
But, I mean, right now we are actually like trying to cover some of the advices that we got from you guys.
yeah. And we're also
Um,
trying to be kind of fair and at least have one ghost country from each continent.
yeah,
Just to get a nice base of coverage, and then we can expand outward from there.
yeah, yeah.
It,
We try to include all the areas and actually even time periods.
yeah,
Um, but it's difficult because like sometimes you see like, oh, that's so interesting. No, right now first I will do this, and then we'll get that other one, because there are actually so many interesting things, and then people who appear there that actually appeared in another episode before already. Um,
yeah. No, we do have. I mean, I know we'll get into this when we do a podcast on Minami Torishima, but I find it interesting. Okay, this is giving away a little bit, but I'll just say we do cover something in Japan in the not too near future. Oh, sorry, no, in the in the not too distant future. I misspoke there, but
wait,
um,
isn't it already out when we do this podcast?
oh, yeah, this is us from the past. So what's going on here? It's like a time loop or something now.
Back to the Future.
Yeah, that's creating a interesting situation, isn't it?
I think the episode is already out when we.
Well, either way, we eventually talk about the Republic of Ezo, and a individual by the name of Enomoto Takiaki actually plays a very significant role in that, and he made kind of a cameo appearance in the Minami Torishima episode to congratulate Mizutani Shinroku, who, didn't die after being stranded on what would, you know,
Congratulated him on not dying.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, uh, it was impressive to make that trip. I mean, let's be honest, in that little
Yeah.
dinky boat as far as they went. But I was going to say it's just kind of interesting that we've got, you know, this kind of cinematic universe where this guy keeps appearing, and I'm sure in future videos he might. And the same holds true with like Epirus. The country just keeps popping up at different time periods, and it will probably feature itself in episodes about other ghost countries.
Yeah. I mean, it would be fun if we had a follower from that area and could
Hmm.
tell us if people actually still remember it in that area.
I think
Would
there
be
is a
interesting.
degree. I mean, that would be interesting to hear from someone actually there, obviously. But I think, to my knowledge, there is a bit of Epirote culture to a degree still does exist. Like there's folk songs and singing and regional stuff, to my knowledge.
Yeah. And this goes, of course, basically for all the episodes that we did. If you are from one of those areas and could tell us a little what people nowadays think about this, or if it's still in the public memory, just write us, because that's always going to be interesting for us.
Oh, definitely. And in the same vein, if there's part of the story we don't know that you think should be covered, or you never know, like a ghost country we never heard of before, something that's just really local and doesn't get coverage whatsoever, yeah, let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, so
And
on these words, I think we can wrap it up for today.
yeah, no, I'd agree. I think despite its long history, Epirus is truly a ghost country at this point in time, but I don't think in any way that detracts from it being a very interesting chapter of history, and it deserves to be remembered. It really does, because it was a major player despite being overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
And yeah, I agree on that. I mean, yeah, I guess that's it. So thanks again, guys, for listening to the podcast. Please feel free to comment, like, share the channel, subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you again next time. That's a very good YouTuber exit, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, guys, see you next time.
Smash
Bye.
that like button. No, I'm just.
That's true, though.
we'll, we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.